Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy, and today we've got a special episode where we're doing 5 projects for under $5. This is hosted by my sweet friend Emily, who does a playlist every month on the 5th. I'll give you more details in a minute, but first, without further ado, let's get started. For this project, I'm going to be using a wire basket from the Dollar Tree, and you can get these pretty much all year long. And then this really pretty sign from the Dollar Tree. It's got the nice wooden frame. I don't know if it's really wood, but then I also have this little tin bunny that I took off of a sign from something else and used it for a project, so we have that left over. And then I have this little carrot garland. These also come in the packages, but I didn't find any at the time, so I had to pick up the garland to get those carrots. And then I have some burlap from burlapfabric.com, so you can just use scrap fabric or whatever. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my sign ready, and I really like when they're covered in plastic because then you know there's not going to be any scratches or anything. Now I'm going to try and take the paper off, but it didn't work out, but that's okay because I'm just going to get the letters and the dark stuff that's going to show through the burlap. If you cover this with fabric or some adhesive tiles or something, you won't have to worry about this part at all. So I just took some hot glue and put that onto the piece of wood and then adhered my burlap to that. And then I'm going to cut that down with my scissors so that it'll fit inside of my frame, and then I'll put it all back together. Now you can still see a little bit of the black writing at the bottom of my sign, but that's okay because we're going to be covering that up. So now I'm going to take my wire basket, and I'm using my wire cutters to cut through that really thick piece at the rim of my basket. And then once I get that started, I'll use my big fat scissors to cut through the actual mesh of the basket. And it goes real easy. This is not good on your scissors, so I don't know that I would recommend it, but you know that I use these for everything, and they're the gift that keep on giving. So I'm going to do the other side as well, and then once I get to the bottom, I'm going to cut around the circular part at the bottom. And if you have to get through something, or if there's like doubled up wire or something that's a little thicker, just use your wire cutters until you get this completely cut down. Now this is going to give you 2 half circles, and so that's why I was saying it would be good if you did 2 of these signs. I always like things, you know, in pairs, especially for wall hangings or whatever, but in this case I just did the one. So now I'm going to take my basket and kind of flatten it out and just manipulate the thick wire, because that's the one that is, you know, the hardest to move around. So once I get that to be a little bit flatter but still have a, you know, a softer circle around the front, I'm going to cut that down to the size that I need so that it wraps around my frame. And then just using my hands, I'm going to use my muscles and just kind of wrap this like a present. And so at the bottom, I'm going to push in the 2 side pieces and then push the front back around to the back. Does that make sense? Now I thought I was going to have to use my needle nose pliers to get that thicker wire, you know, turned back, but I really didn't need it. So once I get it back there, I'm going to cut it down. So it's kind of just like wrapping it with paper or with fabric or something. So I just want as little wire overhanging as possible, but still enough so that it's going to hang on to my frame. So now I'm going to take my little bunny, and I like him as a galvanized metal look, but I really wanted him to be a little bit wider, and it shows up better, I think, on the burlap. So I'm just going to take a makeup sponge and my white chalk paint and just kind of tap around the edges and then knock that shine down a little bit just to make it a little cuter. And then I'm going to take my truffle paint and the same, or maybe I don't know if it was the same makeup sponge, but you know, I'm just going to use a makeup sponge to go around the edges and give it kind of a weathered and distressed look. So while I have my white and my truffle paint out, I'm going to take my makeup sponge and kind of just plop it all over my basket, just to again knock down the perfectly white basket and make it a little more rustic. You could totally leave this part out or not, you know, if you want to go for a brighter look, that would work with this too, but I just thought it was really pretty with that weathered look. So now I'm going to take my little carrots, and I decided to leave some of that twine on there because I'm going to be tying these onto the side of my basket anyway. So that worked out. I didn't even know it would, but you know, that saved me one more step. I didn't have to tie the jute twine onto them to hang them. Now these did have some greenery on there, but they were pretty rough. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those out before I add something else. So I'm going to take some of my scrap greenery that I keep in a bin and look for something that will be cute, that looks like it would be at the end of a carrot. I know it probably doesn't represent what the real greens look like, but you know, this is our party, so we can do what we want. So all I did was took a little piece of that greenery and I'm going to cut that down, leaving the wire in it. And then I just poked that wire into the top of my carrot. And then you can add some hot glue if you want. Now, some of them were a little bit stubborn, so I used my little poker from the Dollar Tree to make a hole first and then put it in there. And then once my greenery was all in there, snug as a bug in a rug, I'm going to take that jute twine and kind of stagger my carrots so that they're hanging, you know, at different levels, and then tie that in a knot. So now I'm going to take some of this floral moss from the Dollar Tree that comes in the sheets, and I'm going to cut that down and slide it into my basket. And then at the top, there was a little bit overhanging. I'm just going to fold that in and tuck it down so that it's right under that rim of my basket. So then I took some Spanish moss and I'm going to tuck that into my little pocket and let some of that hang over. I didn't actually fill the whole pocket, but I just left some poking out. So using moss of any kind is always such a big old mess, and I have my Black & Decker handheld vacuum. I will have this linked in the description box below. My mom got this for us for Christmas one year, and I am telling you, this is not a sponsorship or anything, but I will have it linked below. This is just such a lifesaver. I love this little vacuum. So now I'm going to take my carrots and hot glue those to the side of my basket where I want it. And then I took a Jenga piece and glued that to the back of my sign so that my little bunny will pop out, because I'm also going to glue my little bunny ear to the frame of my sign. So I need that Jenga piece to prop him up so he'll be level. So then I found a last minute addition. I found this Dollar Tree card, and you can find some really cute ones. I got this one last year and I decided to use the little medallion in the front as well as the ribbon on there, and it didn't fit all the way across my little pocket. So I'm going to cut it in half and then split it apart, and then it'll just be the ribbon peeking out from both sides and it'll look like it's wrapping the whole thing. So I just cut that in half, and then to make my little medallion a little bit darker, I'm going to take some truffle paint and distress the edges, give it that rustic look, and then I'm going to attach it to the front after I put my ribbons onto the side, and then I'll glue those in the back. So now to dress my bunny up, I'm going to take some baking twine from the Dollar Tree and just wrap that around my fingers a few times, and then tie it in the middle with some more of the jute twine, and then wrap it around his sweet little neck. And I was going to do some raffia, but I didn't like the looks of it. It was getting a little too busy, so I thought this sweet little simple bow was just perfect, and he was done. And here it is all finished, and I think he's so adorable, and I love that my card added some more of that like galvanized silvery touch, so I thought it was perfect. Now this put me a little bit over the $5 because really we're not talking Dollar Tree anymore, it's a $1.25 tree, so you can only use 4 items in order to make it a $5 project. So I kind of went over, but I did only use half of my basket and half of my garland. So technically I'm not really over, but I love how this turned out and I hope you guys like it too. So I'm super excited today to be co-hosting with my sweet friend Emily from Farm Charm Chic. We're doing the 5 under $5 for Easter and spring decor. There's a whole bunch of people that have been added to the playlist, and they can join every month on the 5th at 5 o'clock, but that's Central Time, I think, or something. But anyway, make sure you check out the entire playlist. There's some really talented crafters on here. And thank you, Emily, for letting me be your co-host this month. So I like to differentiate Easter projects as Jesus projects and spring projects as the bunnies and eggs. And you can find Jesus in everything, including bunnies and eggs. But we're going to make this into an Easter project by turning our sweet little bunny into a sweet little lamb. So I'm going to get all the tags off and take his little bow away. And then I'm going to use my scissors and just carefully shave away the front part of his fur so that it's a little bit closer to what would be his skin, I guess. And I'm just going to shave away until I get a nice clean line toward the top and around his nose and eyes. And you want to be careful so that you don't cut into the fabric of the little stuffed animal. But just cutting away that fur makes a huge difference and turns that sweet little face into a little lamb. So now to make his little lammy ears, I'm going to fold the bunny ear in half towards the front, and then I'm going to fold it over in half again going down, and I'm going to push in that middle piece so that it looks like a little lamb's ear. So that's how I'm going to make it, and then I'm going to add glue this time and go a little bit faster to make those little ears. And then you can just kind of pinch them at the ends to give them a little point, and then he becomes a little lamb. So now I'm going to give him a sweet little bow right around his neck, and I'm using this purple and white gingham from the Dollar Tree, just a little nod to Lent. And then once I get that tied onto him, I'm going to set him aside because now it's time to make a little pedestal. So I'm going to be using a plastic garden dish and a glass from the Dollar Tree. Both of these are from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use my white chalk paint to paint both the inside and the outside of my garden dish. And then on my glass, I'm just going to paint the outside. So once I get it completely covered and it's starting to dry, I'm going to go back and give it some texture by just doing some little hash marks with my paintbrush, and that'll kind of dig into the partially dried paint that we first laid down. And I painted it on there pretty thick, so when I go back in with my brush bristles, it's gonna show those, lines and stuff and give it some texture. And I'm sure you've seen this 70 times. We're just going to add some permanent adhesive as well as some hot glue and attach that to the bottom of our plate. And then now we have a sweet little pedestal. So now I'm going to take a cross from the Dollar Tree, and this is the one with the stand, and I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax and add that to the cross on the front, back, the bottom, everywhere. And I'm just going to brush it on, and then I'll wipe it off with a paper towel so that gets nice and stained. And then with my extras, I'm going to start rubbing that onto my little pedestal and give that some texture. And that's really going to make those bumpity bumps stand out and kind of highlight those and give it a distressing. So I think that's a really pretty look. But if you don't want to do that part and you want the bright white of it, go ahead and leave it however you want to do it. So now because my stand is completely flat, but my plate has a little ridge inside, it kind of, curves up towards the side. So I'm just gonna take some cutters and cut off some of that base so that it'll sit flat inside of my bowl. I end up having to take off almost half of it, or, almost all the way to the cross, but just doing it little by little makes it a bit easier. So now I'm going to take my white paint pen and I'm going to write Grace on here. Now I didn't get it in the middle, so the good thing is because we are afforded grace, we have the back side and can do it over again. So I went ahead and turned it around, and that meant I had to put it on the other side of my bowl once I was done. But this way it was more in the middle and I liked it better because I would have had to have sanded it off and started over, but I just did it on the back. So then once my paint was dry, I'm going to take some hot glue and glue that into the top of my bowl. And then I took a scrap piece of Dollar Tree's flour sack tea towel that I had, and I'm going to use that to cover up all the shenanigans going on at the bottom. And I'm going to set my little lamb right inside. So now I'm going to take some of this foliage from the Dollar Tree, and you can see this is scrap, so this doesn't count as a full $1.25. And I'm just going to pull some of those little pieces off, and they looked a little prickly to me, so I thought that would be perfect for what I'm making, which is going to be a crown of thorns. So I took a little piece of wire and made it into a round crown, and then I'm going to feed on those pieces of greenery and then close that wire up with some masking tape. And then once I get those all on there, I'm going to take some green paddle wire. Well, it doesn't even have to be green, just any kind of paddle wire, and then just start wrapping it around those little pieces of greenery. And then some of it will automatically stick out and I think looks like a crown of thorns. And I have to say, while I was making this, I had my worship music on in the background, and it was really therapeutic and just kind of an intimate time when you're thinking about what you're making and the whole point of the project itself. I think it's a really good time to kind of meditate and just be with Jesus and soak in his presence. And this was a really, well, gosh, once I get done with it, you'll see when I place it on my little lammy's head, I got a little bit emotional, and so you'll see that coming up. But you could also use a little vine napkin holder. I haven't seen those lately at the Dollar Tree, but I think this way, if you use some wire and some foliage or greenery like this, you can make it whatever size you want. And during the Easter season, there's lots of times or different projects that you can use a crown of thorns on. So once I got it all together, because it's green and the wire's purple, I'm going to take my truffle chalk paint and just paint my crown of thorns into that brown color, and I think it looks like a real crown of thorns. So I had mentioned in one of my fall videos that it's hard to find purple flowers at the Dollar Tree during Lent. So I get these during the Halloween season. And so if you remember to pick them up way before Lent actually comes, then you'll have them ready for the Lenten season. So I'm just going to pull 3 of those roses right off of the stem and place them at the base of the cross, and it's done. And here it is, all finished, and I think this is so pretty. I love this so much. I'm pretty proud of myself for coming up with a way to turn a bunny into a lamb. And if you don't glue the cross down, you can use the little pedestal anytime you want. I loved it for this because it kind of reminded me of a paten, which is what the Eucharist is held in. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this project, I'm going to be using a stem of lavender, and I'm not 100% sure this is from Dollar Tree, but I know they have them. And then I've got this round hoop, and I think these come in a pack of 3, but I've used the others for other projects. And then a pack of these spring little galvanized signs. One says spring, one says bunny, and one says welcome. And then I've got a pack of nautical rope, so we'll use the whole pack for this project. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my nautical rope, and I want to find center, but I want to go a little bit lower than the center. So you can see here, it's just a little bit below it, just kind of eyeball it. And then I'm going to take my hot glue and give it a bead of glue right at the very end. And I'm going to fold a teeny piece over onto the back of my hoop. And then I'm going to go to the other side and add some more glue. And if you kind of pinch it and fold it, it stays a little bit better. And then I'll just go back around the back side and add some more glue and then wrap it around again and then just keep going. Now, as you're folding it and gluing it to each side, you want to get it as close to each other as you possibly can and then pull it pretty taut. But then also you can add some extra glue in the middle as you're going so that you can keep those pieces on the front closer together so that there's no real gaps. And then it just happens to work out that it's going to end on the back side as well. So when you finish that roll of nautical rope, the other end, both ends, will be on the back side of our hoop. So now I'm going to take the word welcome, and you can leave it in the galvanized metal just like that. It's really pretty this way too. But I'm going to go ahead and use my white chalk paint and paint over the word. And I did paint it completely white so that it would pop on that nautical rope. So now this is super fun to get rid of those little flyaway strands that are on your rope. You just want to take a lighter and singe those off. I was having a little bit too much fun with that. So then once I'm done, I'm going to take my welcome sign and I'm going to hot glue that onto the front. And since my word's so long and I wasn't able to get the glue on in time, it did dry a little, so you just have to re-glue some areas. And then I'm going to take my lavender piece and stick that right in between in that little pocket. And I had this stem in another arrangement, so it was already cut down and it was the exact right size. So once I tucked it in there, it was done. Now this cost me $5. But I decided that he needed a friend. And because it is springtime, we're going to do Welcome Spring. And so for only $2.50 more, you can have the set. But I think this is so pretty, and you can change out the greenery. If you want to leave that particular flower in there, you could glue that inside. But this way I can change it out and put different flowers in there if I wanted to. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. So we're going to make this next project a part A and part B. This is part A, and I'm using this Dollar Tree birdhouse, and I want to take the part that has all the pretty cutouts on the front off of my birdhouse, and I'm just going to use my CRICUT spatula. I heated it up a little bit with my heat tool, and that's going to help release some of that glue, and then I can just kind of shimmy my spatula into those cracks. And finally, after a while, I'll be able to get it off. I used my craft knife for the bottom part to get that separated, and it just takes a little bit of time and patience, and then I can pull that off. So I'm also going to be removing the piece of rope for the holder. I'm going to take that out, and then I'm also going to be using a wood plaque from the Dollar Tree, a wooden dowel, and 2 Jenga pieces. And then I'm going to mix together some antique wax along with some mineral chalk paint, and then just paint my plaque and my dowel and the front of my birdhouse with that mixture. And then on the birdhouse itself, I'm just going to use my antique wax. Now I accidentally painted the roof of my birdhouse, but you don't need to do that because you'll see why in just a second. But then I'm going to go back, and to lighten it up and give it a pretty distressing, I'm going to take my white chalk paint and just do a dry brush over that. So once my paint is all dry, I'm going to go back in with my sanding sponge and sand down the edges where it would be worn. And then I'll take that dowel and cut that down to the length that I need. Put a bead of glue at the bottom of my birdhouse just to keep it in place while I'm adding my security pieces, and that would be my Jenga pieces. I didn't end up painting these because they're already brown. That's the way they come in the package. So I'm going to put one on each side using my hot glue and then squeeze them together so that it keeps our dowel snug as a bug in a rug. So I had this really pretty fabric in my stash, and I'm going to use that for the top part of my birdhouse and my base, and then I'm also going to put some on the back side of our front part of the birdhouse. So I'm going to take a little piece and then add some hot glue to the back side, and then I'll attach my fabric so that the good side is facing out. And then once it's attached, I'm going to take my scissors and trim off the excess again. And then once I get that done, I'm going to take some hot glue and attach it back onto the front of my birdhouse. And there's going to be a couple of seams that don't have any paint on there, so I'll just touch that up with some antique wax. And now it's time to do our roof. So I'm just going to take a foam brush and some Mod Podge and add it to the top of my birdhouse. And this is why I didn't need to stain that in the first place, but you know, I had a little brain toot. So I'm just gonna add that and then make it all nice and flat by pushing it into that Mod Podge and making sure that's super secure. And then I'll use my scissors to cut off the excess. So now I'm going to take my holy wood and my drill and drill a hole into my base, and I want to do that before I add my fabric to the bottom. So I'll just do the same thing, add a layer of Mod Podge and then put it on top of my wood, and then I cut around it as much as I could, trimmed it all off, and then I'm going to use my sanding sponge again to kind of finish those edges, and that just kind of makes the fabric go around all of those pretty curves. So now I'm going to take my craft knife and poke a hole into, well, kind of an X to make that hole available for my dowel, and then I'll just tuck that inside of there, and it's pretty tight. I got a bit that was about the same size as my dowel, a little bit smaller, so you don't even have to use any glue, and it stays in there all nice and tight. So now I'm going to take some 5/8 inch rose colored ribbon from the Dollar Tree, just tie a sweet little bow at the bottom, and that's done. So now here's part B, and I lost the footage of using my Brie cheese container that you've probably seen me use it before for nests in other spring videos, but I'm going to cover it all with some Spanish moss, and then I'm going to take some reindeer moss and add that to it just to give it a little bit of interest. And then I cut off all of the excess flyaways so that it looks like a little nest. And again, we're using this messy moss, and so I use a little tray just to try and keep some of it contained, but that doesn't always work, as you saw in the other one. So now I'm going to take some Dollar Tree raffia, and this is the kind that you have to untwist, you know, and I thought this was a really pretty dusty rose looking color, so I'm just going to untwist it as much as I can until I get it flat, and then I'll make little strips with my scissors to turn it into kind of a raffia that is kind of shredded, and we can make it into a bow. But apparently we're going to do that a little bit later. So first we're going to take some pretty scrap flowers from the Dollar Tree and some lamb's ear. I have these little white berries from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to add that to my nest, and then the lamb's ear. And again, these are all scraps, but if you were to buy everything, you know, it'd be $1 million. But for this one, it's actually going to be free, except for, you know, my moss and Ooh, and my brie, that was really good. So I'm just gonna take these little pieces and just attach them wherever I want. And I'm kind of pushing most of that all into one little corner. I have these sweet little flowers from Dollar Tree. And then here we're finally gonna go ahead and shred this raffia. I just cut a couple of strips and then I'm gonna make that into a little bow and just roll that around my fingers and make a sweet little bow and then attach that to my little bird nest prettiness over to the side. And then I have this little sparrow that well, I've had this forever. This was from my mother-in-law's funeral. I have 70, 11 of them. And so I'm going to tuck him in there. And I thought he could use some feathers. I was trying to think of what's actually in a real bird's nest. So this could be something that's in there. So that's our part B. Now, on to our very last project. This one is going to be less than $5. So I'm going to use some cardboard and some styrofoam that I had from some packing items for husband's backyard patio. So I'm going to use the cardboard the length that it came, which was 42 inches. So half of 42 inches is 21 inches. So what I did was I took my measuring tape and I'm just going to measure 21 inches, but I'm going to just put it somewhere in the middle. And that'll make sense of why I did that in a second. So then I'm going to go up 3.5 inches, and that's how wide this is going to be. And then I made 2 little handles and just cut that out of some copy paper and traced it onto my 21-inch line. And this is so that my handles, we're making a tray, I didn't tell you that, but this is so my handles will be halfway, or right across from each other in the right position of where my rounded tray is going to be. So I didn't want my handles to be where the opening was, where I have to put the cardboard together, because then it wouldn't be as strong. So once I get them all cut out and that's in one piece, I'm going to start making it circular by taking those jaggedy parts of the cardboard. You know how there's the little ziggity zaggities inside of there? I'm going to bend those so that it becomes a full circle, and that's going to be the outside part of our tray. And then I'm going to take some painter's tape and attach that together, and that's actually going to come off, but I need it to be a full circle so that I can measure and cut my styrofoam. So to do that, I'm going to use a heat wand, and all of these tools that I have will be linked in the description box below. So I'm just going to cut that out, and I love doing this. This is so much fun, and I'm speeding up the process because it does take a while. But this was just the styrofoam that I had, just because this is what came with the shipping. It was a refrigerator. So I've been using the heck out of this styrofoam, I'll tell you that. So if you have some thinner styrofoam, that would work just as well. You could even use some Dollar Tree foam core board, because we're going to end up covering it all anyway. So as you can see, I'm going to be using some jute twine, and this is where I untaped my sides because it was easier to start going around with an open end instead of passing it through that circle all the whole way. So I'm just going to start it at one side. I'm leaving a little space because when I do put it back together, I need to have space for my tape. And then I'm just going to start wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. Now these rolls I think I got from Amazon, or it could have been, no, these are actually Dollar Tree. So yeah, these are Dollar Tree jute twine rolls, but the other kind that they have are the tubular shapes like I showed a little while ago, but I was still talking. But anyway, so I'm just going to wrap, and then the area where the handle is, I'm going to leave that open, and then we'll come back and do it a little bit later. Now we're going to cut 4 little horseshoes that are going to all attach to make one handle for each side. And so I have a little bit shorter piece and then a longer piece. The bottoms of those I'm going to wrap in the jute twine, and then right in the center of my round piece, I'm going to wrap that with the jute twine as well. So I'm leaving a little space for where those cardboard pieces, the horseshoes, are going to fit once we get done. And you'll see that come together at the end. So then to cover up my styrofoam, I'm going to use some more of that pretty fabric that I had. And I'm just going to use my hot glue and wrap this around my entire piece of styrofoam. And I like that this one is really thick just because that's going to make it a little bit sturdier. But I'm just going to pull that all around the back side of my styrofoam and glue, and then I'll chop that off and trim it around so that there's not so much bulky fabric. And then I found this Dollar Tree fall sign, and I'm going to glue that to the bottom just to cover all of that up. So now I'm going to come back and add my painter's tape to put my tray back together, and then I'm going to finish it up with that jute twine to cover up the rest of my tray. Once I get it all put together, I'm going to take my bottom part and just push it on in there. And again, I didn't even use any hot glue. It just stays snug as a bug in a rug. And my little sign, well, I'll show you that in a minute. Anyway, I'm going to take my hot glue now that I have all of my pieces. I'm going to put the longer one on the outside in those open areas, so I'm gluing it onto the cardboard itself. And then on the inside, because my tray bottom is a little bit tall, I'm going to make that horseshoe a little bit shorter so that it's flush at the top, and then I'll add some more hot glue on both sides of my handle, and they'll meet right in the middle, and it'll all be a happy party. And it's nice and thick, and this is totally usable and super heavy duty, even though it's really light. But anyway, you'll see it at the end. But my sign was a little bit warped, so it actually was built into, accidentally, a Lazy Susan tray. So I love those happy accidents. So now the finishing touch is just to wrap the rest of your handles and make that go all the way around. Glue it anywhere you need to keep it secure, or if you need it to go in a certain direction. But once you get it all wrapped, and it takes a lot of time, but I think it is so pretty. And here it is all finished. You have your little tree house on the top there, and my nest. I used a Dollar Tree vase with some pretty mums inside, and then some eggs from the Dollar Tree, and I just cut that down. It was a 6-pack. I made it a 4-pack, but I think this is so pretty and well worth the patience of wrapping that entire piece. I hope you guys enjoyed all of these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it, so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Don't forget to check out the playlist. I'm going to try and link it at the end on my end screen, but if not, go ahead and check it out down below in the description box as always, and in the comments. Thank you, Emily, for letting me be your co-host for the month. Don't forget the real reason for the season. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye.